and welcome to Conscious Curiosities, where we unlock the wisdom of the universe which lies within us. I'm Maria Luz, your host, a certified hypnotist, astrologer, and psychic medium. Today's episode is entitled Pluto, Evolution and Transformation for Our Own Good. As you know, I have a standard agenda for my podcast episodes on the planets, and I typically describe the mythology, the astronomy, and then I delve into the archetype through its astrological associations. And then I briefly describe how it might look through the 12 signs or the houses of the zodiac, so you can apply that information. But today, Pluto would just not let me do that. And there is just no use resisting for reasons that I will get into later. So this week's episode, thank you Pluto, will cover the following. What makes the Pluto archetype different? It represents our soul, and that is only the beginning. And then how I came to evolutionary astrology. Some of the mythology and astronomy that I love, but a little bit abbreviated today. And then finally, I will get to that application for you and walk through what Pluto might look like in each of the 12 houses of the zodiac. So you'll want to have a copy of your birth chart ready for that part at the end. I do apologize if my voice still sounds weird. Actually, last week when I recorded, I didn't realize I was sick yet. And I was kind of, maybe I was a little bit out of it, which was kind of perfect because I was doing a little bit on Neptune, and I also recorded the hypnotic track, which I kind of go into a different realm anyway when I'm recording those. So so there's that. Yeah, it's been a week. And I'm going to go ahead and get started now with what Pluto kind of directed me to do, again, for my own good and all of ours, I'm sure. But Pluto really gets at the heart of astrology for me. And it's how we come closest to describing and understanding how individuals are connected to the collective of beings, in the natural world and to the universe, really, across time, space, and dimension. The astrologer Jeffrey Wolf Green writes, "If each person understands what his or her own evolutionary requirements are, and operates in such a way as to actualize those requirements, then the collective evolutionary necessities will be developed in a non-cataclysmic way." And that is from his book, Pluto, Volume 1, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul, in the introduction. And I chose that passage for a couple of reasons. One is that it implies that evolution will occur through our individual actions. And it is possible to occur smoothly, or as he says, in a non-cataclysmic way, if each individual understands the requirements and then follows through with aligned action. However, that doesn't sound so much like us humans, does it? We don't spend a huge amount of energy trying to understand, the meaning of life. And then we don't frequently tend to act with those highest intentions in mind. But regardless, again, that implication is that evolution will occur. It's just a matter of what it looks like. And so it becomes a question of, how apparently sudden or disruptive that inevitable evolution will be achieved. And because we just can't stop it, it may only appear sudden, But actually, it's this cumulative convergence of, a multitude of forces that result in what might look like a sudden metamorphosis to those of us who are just standing around witnessing it at that moment. So already you can see that Pluto goes deep, and it goes deep fast. And you are just along for the ride, I'm sorry, on this episode. So I hope it's entertaining, if nothing else. But in the book, Jeffrey Wolf Green, he gave the examples of an earthquake and the whole Watergate hotel situation, which eventually led, to Richard Nixon's forced resignation. So he gave those examples as these kind of cataclysmic evolutionary events. Obviously, if you look at each of those, there are factors that led up to that kind of sudden moment in time. And I guess I should back up, because you're probably like, who is this Jeffrey Wolf Green dude? And he's an astrologer, and in 1977, he had this dream that basically laid out this whole Pluto paradigm. And so he wrote that book that I quoted from, Pluto Volume 1, in addition to other books following that. And he really made it his life's work to communicate this information to other people, other astrologers, to use as a paradigm with their clients. So I am studying there's a school that was created out of his teaching. So I've been studying with that school. So that is, again, I just kind of went down into the underworld with Pluto, and I didn't give you any context. So there's a little bit, and maybe some more will come out, and we'll see. So back to the cataclysmic versus, non-cataclysmic looking evolutionary events. So if the soul allows progressive growth over great amounts of time, then this can yield more of a gentle evolutionary experience. And in theory, of course, one cannot really know for certain. Our souls seek this through repeated incarnations and work with other souls and beings on these individual evolutionary efforts that, again, are the only way to drive the collective evolution. And as I was thinking about this, I was about like this going, it almost sounded like, oh, you go with the flow on what your soul wants, and you have this gentle evolutionary experience. So how does boredom fit in with that, or challenge? And, some of you might be saying, my life has been full of challenges. So why haven't I felt like I've evolved or I've grown, to where I want to be? Or worse, sometimes I feel like I'm being punished and I don't know why. And how does that connect to the soul's evolution? And possibly it's about having the right challenges, not just the convenient ones. We can make life really challenging, but in a superficial way, or at least in a way that holds little or no meaning to us as an individual. We can definitely reach around and simply by, I think, looking in the wrong places for challenge, we make things more challenging for us. I think that's kind of part of the design. But the clue will be, are we finding that meaningful? And there is a sweet spot, and some may call it a flow state, where one feels this extreme ease, and it's almost as if time disappears when doing something complicated or even extremely difficult and complex. And maybe that's when we've accumulated those evolutionary experiences, plus we're using our gifts appropriately. And that concept of, am I being punished? That seems to be more of a man-made judgment on occurrences. I think we're really good at labeling things because it helps us make sense of the world. But Pluto is also about mystery and deep mysteries. And maybe there's no space really for punishment in this. And if you don't feel you did anything to deserve punishment, then maybe don't keep looking for the reason and instead look for the lesson. And that is what will drive your evolution and thereby the collectives. So, in fact, I am being punished can become an excuse or a way of living that actually prevents evolutionary growth for oneself and therefore the collective. Not to say that people don't have really horrible things happen to them, but it's the adopting that, I guess, as your story versus accepting, surrendering, looking for the lesson. And I know, easier said than done. So with that basic, and in my show notes, I put basic in quotations because that's not really the right word, but with that basic introduction, and now Pluto's foot is kind of off my neck a bit, about like diving in really deep right away, I can back up a little. So I promise I will get to how to interpret your own Pluto placement and where Pluto in the sky is sitting right now in your chart. But first I want to explain myself a little bit. My evolutionary astrology origin story, which is Plutonian in that it is mysterious, it's deep, it's painful at times, but most of all, and very on brand for Pluto, it is a story of transformation. And of course, I can't possibly tell my entire life story or we would be here for days and you would resort to eating pomegranate seeds out of desperation, just like Pluto's captive in the myth, Persephone. And again, I don't know where this came from, as the beginning of this episode as well. But this kind of soundtrack or an album about my life kind of came to me. I mean, clearly not the music, because I'm not a musician, but just kind of the titles of the songs. So I'm just gonna read the tracks that came to me, and for anyone who's musically inclined, please feel free to do your thing and make your epic soundtrack to my life if you so choose. Okay. Track 1, Star Being Takes New Shape. Track 2, These Rules Are Confusing as Hell. Track 3, Not Actually Getting the Hang of It. She Fakes Real Good. Track 4, Damn, This Hurts. She discovers a liquid that eases the pain enough to keep following the rules for the most part. Track 5, Egads, this liquid and the fake life hurt more than the real life. Track 6, the Tower card, her fake life falls. Track 7, from the dirt, her magical senses sprout back to life. Track 8, now a butterfly, but with some tire tracks on her wings. Some of my Jeffrey Wolf Green School mentors have said that people don't choose to study this lineage of astrology. Instead, it calls the soul. It must have done that for me, somewhere between those tracks 6 and 7 in my fake album, when the Tower card, the fake life falls happens, and then from the dirt, my magical senses just started coming back to me, because I can't, for the life of me, I cannot consciously remember how I came to this particular school of thought, or the Pluto paradigm, and evolutionary astrology. When I describe how I came into astrology to other people, I say that it was more of remembering than a learning. And even though back then I was still very much in my corporate, left brain mindset, but I couldn't deny it. Like, there's no way that I could account for learning this very deep language and being able to talk about it in an articulate way in that amount of time. So it really felt more like a soul knowing, or in my human words, like, a remembering. And again, it's obviously too much to analyze my life and where free will versus my soul's plan fit in, on at least on this podcast episode, maybe somewhere else, maybe in a book or something. But I will say that I don't think our soul plan is like a project plan or a checklist, because that wouldn't allow for those beautiful and terrible experiences that are sometimes, wrapped up in the same package. And that is being human, I think. Now, onto briefly the mythology. So you may have caught that I slipped in a bit about Pluto's mythology already. Pluto and Hades are different names for the same god, the god of the underworld, who is the brother of Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, and Juno. And I'm sure I'm missing some of the Olympians. But there are slightly different interpretations of the Pluto myths. But he seems to have abducted his niece, Persephone, Persephone of the pomegranate seeds, who he desired, and he tried to court her. But her mom, Demeter, was very possessive and just, wanted Persephone all to herself and didn't want her to get married to anyone, let alone her brother. Things were different then. Okay, so anyway, Pluto ended up abducting Persephone, making her his wife and queen of the underworld. And again, because of that battle of wills between Pluto and Demeter, Zeus intervened and made a deal for Persephone to reside half the time with Demeter, during which time, because Demeter was the queen of the harvest, she was happy and she would have things grow on Earth. However, in the halftime when Persephone was in the underworld with Pluto, everything would go barren because Demeter was so angry and never got over it. So that is briefly the most prominent myth about Pluto. The astronomy, Pluto, the planet, has its own story of transformation. And it was called a planet for 75 years, but then it was reclassified to a dwarf planet. So it had this transformation of identity, really. And that happened because some other similar-sized objects that were also in that same area beyond Neptune, in what's called the Kuiper Belt, were discovered. And Pluto, backing up, was discovered in 1930 by Clyde Tombaugh at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. But it was named by this 11-year-old girl named Venetia Burney in Oxford, England. And I had to look up why, because that seemed so strange. But again, Pluto is kind of weird and has these secrets. So anyway, it wasn't too hard to uncover the secret. And it was that her grandfather had connections because, see, he was the retired library at the Bodleian, which is that amazing library at Oxford University. And so he had these connections to astronomers, including the ones in the US, and he was able to pass on Venetia's idea. And she basically said that it just seemed logical to her because she knew Pluto was a god in the mythology, and that followed along the paradigm for naming the planets, and it hadn't been used yet. So that's her claim to fame. I mean, she did go on to, she had a career as well, not to do with astronomy. And then the other thing is just on the physical part of Pluto, NASA's spacecraft New Horizons did go up and explore Pluto and its moons in 2015. And of course, and these are even NASA's words, they found it to be complex. So again, more Pluto mystery and complexity stuff. But it apparently has mountains, valleys, plains, craters, and even glaciers. And now I will go through Pluto through the houses. And Pluto is another one of these generational planets because it is further out and takes longer to orbit the sun. And so individuals born within about a 20-year time period will share the sign. And we are currently in an interesting time as Pluto has been waffling back and forth a bit between really its last stages in Capricorn and its ingress into Aquarius, which it will move permanently into, or not permanently, sorry, but it will move forward in Aquarius for the next 20 years or so, starting in November. And so we will have some babies born, around this time frame that are, that could be either sign. And then the other thing to watch for that's, I think, is interesting is that there is that big generation called the baby boomers, and most of them were born with Pluto and Leo. And they are going to experience their Pluto opposition as it will be sitting there moving through Aquarius, which is Leo's polar opposite. So I am anticipating some meltdowns because, as you can imagine, I mean, everyone knows the stereotypical Leo qualities. So not that I'm trying to put everybody in that category, but they are archetypes for a reason. And so you can imagine Pluto and Leos can be used to being able to express themselves and having people pay attention. And maybe that is going to be challenged. And there, just so you know, there is a very, very thorough and detailed method used in the Jeffrey Wolf Green School of Evolutionary Astrology. And the reason we learn how to do that really thorough and detailed method is so that we can have a really clear and meaningful consultation, with the clients who are seeking to understand what their soul desires and how this life may integrate that lesson. So it's, I want to say it's like the complete opposite of those, newspaper horoscopes or magazine horoscopes, but it's not even opposite. It's just in a totally different realm. So I'm working on my certification, and it's just really interesting work as we go through these different birth charts, and they have accompanying biographies because it's really important, again, because of that collective piece, and the fact that it's not like a 3D printer and like the birth chart has the directions for this exact, 3D person to match. Everyone's life circumstance, of course, varies how things can be expressed. So for the purposes of this podcast, to get you started, I really want to just riff off another evolutionary astrologer, Stephen Forrest, his Book of Water. The subtitle I love as well is Healing, Regeneration, and Recovery. Just to follow his formula where he walks through Pluto entering each house so that you can look at your chart and see where late Capricorn, early Aquarius is. And that's where you'll most likely be feeling this energy that I describe by house. But of course, you need to take into consideration your chart as a whole. And the other thing, the way I tried to riff off of his work, I was also keeping in mind for you to use this as the house that your natal Pluto resides in. So keep that in mind as well. And I'll say it later, but of course, if you have any questions, I am so happy to take your emails. And I love this stuff, as you can probably tell. So the first house, the aim is to become an individual who is honest, direct, and authentic. So think opposite of a people pleaser. And of course, don't be mean. Direct doesn't have to be mean. Be as kind as possible with the truth. As you know, we learn our soul lessons by engaging with other people. So we need other people. And then the second house, the aim is to maintain that authenticity while gathering and maintaining the resources needed. And so think, second house, Taurus, is about, getting that stable footing, really having enough stuff to keep us warm and eat. But beware of hoarding or leveraging these resources over others. And then the third house, the aim is to hone skills of perception and use them to evolve. And, it's not fun getting stuck in word dramas or ruminative thoughts. So just avoid that pitfall of this third house, power with perception and communication and words. Fourth house, the aim is to deeply understand my roots, my family of origin, my ancestors, that type of thing. And I need to sort out cycles and determine which foundations are meant to be built upon. The fifth house, the aim is to live in a state of self-expression and creativity with purpose and meaning, as opposed to getting lost in the possibility of meaningless fun as a way of existence. The sixth house, the aim is to be of service in a way that leverages my innate discernment for the highest good. If I'm getting this right, my days may feel in flow and my health will thrive. But if I don't, I will feel that drudgery and, possibly ill health as the themes of my day-to-day experience. And then, if you remember, sixth house is health, is associated with Virgo and kind of the day-to-day. The seventh house, the aim is to be present and authentic in personal relationships. I remember there's always a give and take, and there is a real individual and not just a projection on the other side. So remember, seventh house is about our relationships, not just romantic, but those one-on-ones. And until I learn that bit about a real person on the other side, I might repeat or even, have destructive patterns in relationships. The eighth house, the aim is to keep in mind how brief life is, yet how it can contribute to my soul's and the collective evolution. I need to understand my why and others' whys in order to find meaning and live fully. There is a risk of getting stuck in my own and others' dramas, including secrets and cover-ups, which cause destruction. The 9th house. The aim is to explore the big questions around a belief and philosophy in order to glean the natural wisdom in the world. The more I travel physically or through learning, the more I will understand and be able to help others with their own explorations. I need to avoid falling into the trap that my own beliefs are always best. And the 10th house. The aim is to fulfill the leadership role that seems to be held just for me. I have matured into this position and appreciate the responsibility and power involved. I have to be aware of my personal integrity so as not to become a chess piece in the status quo's master plan. The 11th house. The aim is to ask myself about the groups I identify with and what is the end game with them, because that is my fate. Instead of being in groups for superficial or unexamined reasons, I need to be intentional about where I decide I belong if I truly care about evolving to my highest and best self. The 12th house. The aim is to understand that psychological work is tied with spiritual work because there is no separation of my divine part from my human. Wounds must be unhidden in order to be released, and my own power to forgive is key to divine healing. The risk of not going there is that I feel cut off from the transcendent, alone in the physical plane, possibly self-pitying defeat stories are stuck on repeat. And you are now empowered to be consciously curious about Pluto. If you want to personally work with me, please visit my website, www.marialuz.online. And if you're looking for a specific idea of where to start, I have been doing a few solar return readings, and those are usually done around a birthday, and they look at the year ahead and possible energies that you can work with or at least be aware of. So those have been, I think, helpful based on the feedback I've gotten so far. You can use the code AstroHip for 20% off. And I also have a shop on that website, which has some hypnotic tracks and some gift certificates as well. So check those out. And I want to be sensitive to anyone who might be short on money, but really wants to tap into astrology. So please email me if that's you, and we can work something out. My email is info@marialuz.online. And finally, please share this podcast so you can talk about it with your friends and rate and review it so other people can find it. I really appreciate you, especially listening to this kind of strange Plutonian foray today, and with my COVID brain probably not helping. So anyway, go out there, have a wonderful holiday if you're in the US, or have a wonderful day if you're somewhere else or you're listening to this in the future. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.